Welcome to Healing Medicine, formerly the Mindful Healers podcast.
This is the podcast for physicians and healthcare professionals who crave balance and purpose. If you want to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We are Dr. Jessie Mahoney
And Dr. Nichang Liang, physicians who bring decades of experience in physician health and wellness and leadership to the wellness conversation. Like so many of you, we felt the exhaustion, the disillusionment, and the weight of a career that demands so much, often at the expense of our own well being.
In this podcast, we explore mindfulness, mindset, and real, sustainable health and well-being strategies.
Not as another task to add to your plate, but as a way to experience medicine and life differently.
Each episode dives into practical strategies, coaching tools, and real conversations to help you feel more present, fulfilled, and in control.
When we are healthy and well, we become powerful agents of change.
If you're ready to break free from exhaustion, cynicism, overwhelm, feeling ineffectual and stuck, and rediscover joy and presence, you are in the right place.
A life and a career that truly fits you await.
Reminder that nothing in this podcast is medical advice. Welcome to today's episode, Standing Tall in Surgery, Finding Fulfillment Outside the Mold, with our special guest, Dr. Jenny Kang. So today's episode is a story sharing courage and clarity and confidence and how it's possible to find fulfillment in an unconventional path, even in neurosurgery. And our intention is to offer a glimpse of what becomes possible when physicians, and particularly women physicians and women in surgery, stop hiding and begin to live and practice in alignment. Takeaways from today's episode are that you don't have to do it the way that others told you, or even that you think you're supposed to. You can create a life that fits. And when women physicians live aligned lives, they bring back healing into medicine and become the kind of physicians that we really need. So welcome, Jenny. I'm so happy that you are joining me today.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
And we will start by just sharing how we met, which is we met at a retreat a little bit over a year ago. And after that retreat, you went back and started making more changes. You'd already made quite a few changes. And then we did some one-on-one coaching. And when we finished our coaching a few weeks ago, it was really clear that we should share your story and its many lessons for many other people out there who are struggling to find their way and figure out how they fit and who are maybe hiding in plain sight. So some of the lessons we're going to share are a few things that you told me right before we started recording, which is that you really wanted to share that it's possible to find yourself and that you can actually do things the way you want and nothing bad happens. It's okay to care less about what others think, and that we get to live our lives. Each of our lives is our own life to live. And those are extremely powerful lessons, which interestingly, even as I say them, and when you said them to me the first time, we always want to add all these caveats, like do things the way you want, but within reason, and make sure that you still care, and all of these caveats on the back end. And so it's interesting how hard it is to really lean into standing tall as who you are, even when you are an amazing human who's saving lives every day and doing important things, which almost everyone in medicine is. So I would love if you're willing to jump in and just share your story about how you showed up at the retreat a year ago and who you were and who you are now.
Thanks, Jessie, again for having me. Well, I came to Sagrada, as you know, a year ago, just questioning a lot of decisions I'd made in my life. I, at the time, thought that I wanted to quit neurosurgery and that I had chosen a very bad path for myself. And, I probably felt regretful about time lost with my kids and etc. I was in I enjoyed a lot of different things in my life that I felt that I put to the side, hobbies or skiing or spending time with friends and family. Um, and I was spending most of my time not enjoying neurosurgery. So I felt at that time that I might leave neurosurgery and pursue something else. And at the time, I talked to you about design, which I still love. But I have gotten to the point now where I am leaning into my current situation and I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I can foresee enjoying it and having it as a fulfilling career until I retire, while also enjoying these personal things that I've in the past ignored. I'm now enjoying time off with my family. I have a bunch of hobbies that I'm getting more and more into, and I've developed a ton of new female friendships that have been really fulfilling as well.
I just love hearing that. And tell us actually what your current practice setup is that has allowed you to love neurosurgery again.
Well, my setup currently is that I commute out of town and I travel every week, every other week. So one week I'll be gone working, and the other week I'll come back to my home base and share time with my family. And, at first glance, that may seem like a big sacrifice. But as I've been doing it, it's part sacrifice, but part great. And what I mean by that is, when I'm gone from home, yes, I'm gone from home. But as we all have experienced, I'm sure, sometimes when you're working 10, 12 hours in a day anyway, you come home and you're spent. You don't really have the energy to make dinner and help with homework, etc. My kids are old enough that they're kind of at that stage as teenagers that they don't necessarily need me hands on a lot. But nonetheless, when I am at home, I'm so present. I do cook for them. I do hang out with them. I know their friends. I can joke around with them and be involved. And so that has been great. I enjoy it.
And so let's talk a bit about how you got from the place where you were wanting to leave neurosurgery and become an interior designer, which I also loved that story as well, and to this place where you love it. So it started with this realization that things were different for female surgeons and that this was a part of your story. Do you want to share a bit about how that appreciating that it is different for females has played into your story?
Yeah, and I think it's all interwoven and not directly related, but when I started my career and even in residency, the tendency was just to be friends with men, guys, coworkers, because that's who your coworkers are in surgery. And the tendency was to, at least for me, and I've spoken to some other female neurosurgeons, the tendency was to try and fit in, be like the guys, act like the guys, have the same goals as the guys. But then when I started out in my practice, it, just realizing that as much as you want to try and be a guy, you're not a guy for various reasons, clearly. But also, the way the world reacts to you as a female surgeon is not the same as it reacts to a guy. And also, really importantly, which I didn't realize, at least for me and maybe for some other female neurosurgeons, the fulfillment or reward, I guess, that you get out of it is different. I'm not going to say bad or good, but different. And there are challenges specific to women. I think women are judged more harshly for maybe less than perfect outcomes. I think women are judged more harshly for, frustrations or expressing frustrations. And this has all been shown, in various different books.
And patients and families react differently. They actually want you to spend more time with them. They have different expectations of a woman surgeon. It's not about competence. In fact, there's been a lot of studies to show that the competence of women physicians, I'm not laying blame on anyone, but is actually higher, but that patients do have different expectations of how you interact with them. and how you'll interact with their families.
Right. And, questions that they'll ask a female neurosurgeon or female surgeon,
Mhm.
or the amount of time they want with you is different. These are all just small things that I had noticed through time. But it also just wasn't, I think the criticism or the standards that I was being held to were different. And it was hard to advance to that next level um, for me. So essentially, there were some other challenges, in my local culture that were difficult. But essentially, ultimately, what happened was I just realized that I wasn't happy doing what I was doing, and it wasn't working for me. And so after a few years, my husband was being affected, my family was being affected, and it just came to the point where I said, this just really isn't working, and I don't want the same thing just in a slightly different location. I want something better or different, something that's going to fit for me. So I chose to look for an unconventional path or unconventional situation. And I just decided to call around to see if I could travel for work. And I didn't want to do locums quite at this point because just knowing myself, it would be hard to schedule locums. And that's just isolated to me. So I wanted to have a very succinct, regular place to go work. So I started calling around to recruiters. I asked if this was going to work for them. Some of them said no, some of them said yes. And I ended up at a position where I work 1 week on, 1 week off. I travel. I go to the same place every week. I have the same place that I stay. And I went through, we've gone through a lot of changes at my current position, which I think is just the state of healthcare in general. And, but things have significantly evolved and are evolving. And I have gotten to the point where I'm just flourishing as a surgeon, but as a person, as we've discussed.
And when I first met you, you had this job, which is actually the exact same job. I mean, rules change slightly, and I mean, what doesn't change in healthcare every month? But you still had a bit of this sort of shame or story that this was less than rather than more than, which I think is what you have now come to believe a year later. And so, how did you shift from that story of like, you know, it not working for you where you were and not working for you in the traditional setup as failure, and that to it actually being brilliant?
That's such a great question. And I'm glad you asked that. When I left my last situation, I knew it wasn't right. And I knew it was destroying kind of like the inner me and my family. And it was making me unhappy. However, and so I knew it had to happen. However, I felt that twinge of shame that I had failed somehow, or that it was my fault, or that I couldn't hack it. But the thing is, I did hack it in the same location more or less for 14 years. And I did see things around me that, where many, many people in the same kind of geographic area were unhappy. But it was just this underlying feeling of failure or shame. And um, it was hard to shake. And so eventually, as I started the position, things don't go away immediately. I think it was just a process of doing more, getting more comfortable, finding my place,
I think
realizing.
I'm wondering too, I think you actually went to a lot of specific effort to work on your mindset and to stop judging yourself and to stay out of that. um, I'm thinking compare and despair, and there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it.
And
You
you
did
helped
a
me
lot
with
of
that.
work around that. And I'm reminded when you brought up this idea of shame, that this idea is shame is often the emotion that is brought up when there's really no good reason for like one place being better or worse than the other. But when we change in healthcare or when they're asking us to do certain things, if there's not really a good reason, shame is the emotion that comes up. So it's interesting that, you know, if we make a change, we feel shame because most places want to stay in a certain place and do it their way, which of course is easier for everyone in some capacity. But I think just recognizing that shame is our default emotion in medicine whenever we aren't doing things according to the standard checkbox. And just to, I think the acknowledgement that it's literally coming because you're doing it in a different way. And that's the culture of medicine, but we take it personally and it's really about us and we need to be ashamed. And I think, you know, we have all these things people are practicing clinical or not clinical or full or part-time, or they travel or they stay in one place or they, you know, and locums would be a different criteria. Like we have all of these judgments of what's better rather than acknowledging that there's lots of different ways to do it that work and provide healthcare in amazing ways to different people all over the country.
Absolutely. And now that I've been here and I have met so many interesting and wonderful people who do what I do, and ultimately they're happy and they're fulfilled. And I'm just realizing that um, it was just something inner that I had to work through. You and I worked through it. It's a lot of trauma from
Yeah.
residency. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, what's the first emotion you feel when you do something wrong or you forget something? It's always shame. Um, but ultimately, I've gotten to the point where now I am someone that people come to me and ask me about my situation and say, "Hey, how did you get to that point? Do you like it? What are you doing? How are you doing it?" Um, I recently was at an event and a woman I knew from residency, I hadn't seen for years, is married to another person from my residency who was in surgery, and she was begging me to talk to her husband about what I was doing.
Interesting. Yeah, so interesting. It reminds me a bit of the idea also that in medicine, it's often not safe to be different. And I think that's even more
Mhm.
true in surgery. And you mentioned just being a female in surgery or having children as a surgeon, like that's different. And even there, we hide that and we feel a sense of shame and we don't stand tall, even though it's actually all, I mean, you can't change the fact that you are a woman, right? But you try to blend in and fit in. And so when you do something that doesn't blend in and fit in and do it in a different way, it of course initially evokes shame.
Definitely. I think thankfully and hopefully, um, the world is evolving for the better in that respect. But I do feel that, you know, at a certain point, before gay marriage was legalized, before, you know, Me Too happened, you know, there's been an evolution for women. And certainly years ago, you know, that need to fit in with the guys was extremely strong for me, at least in I feel in my
I
era.
think
And
for most
so
women in surgery,
yes,
women
and
in
I hope
medicine.
it's improving, but we'll see.
And I'm interested in hearing a little bit. So when you came to the retreat a year ago, you were thinking you wanted to quit. And you got to a point where you actually figured out you loved the work still of neurosurgery. And you mentioned at some point, like, it wasn't the neurosurgery that you didn't like. It was all the other stuff in medicine, which I think is true for so many people. We still love the medicine. We just don't love all the trappings that come with it. So how did you get back to a place where you could love the medicine and let the trappings go?
You know, I finally got to a point where through coaching with you and therapy and just growing as a person that I realized that this is actually my life. I can lead my life the way I want to lead it. And so if I approached my job, authentically and with honesty and just the way that I felt that I had integrity in my work. I just approached it from that perspective with the idea that, okay, we'll see how this works out because I don't want it any other way. And as I did that and things progressed and, nothing is isolated um, completely, a lot of other good things happened, new staff, this and that. There are a lot of female surgeons where I work as well, which is fabulous. Um, it just got to the point where I felt like I was doing good and I was doing a great job, and I feel happy and fulfilled in what I'm doing. And I also created the schedule that I wanted so that I could have a personal life as well that was fulfilling to me. And that's something that I had denied myself for, the last 20 years.
I remember you saying that you had been living according to others' ideals and other ideas of what things, whether it's cultural, family, the culture of surgery, and that you had just gotten squished underneath all of that.
Yes, just some of these big fish stories, that my colleagues would have about, I did this many cases, or I did that many cases, or I did, I worked this much, or I did that much, and I did this many RVUs. You get caught up in that and you feel like, oh, well, I should be doing all of that, and I should be this busy, and I want to do all of these things. But then when I stepped back and thought about it, I thought, actually, I don't want to do that. And it's okay because I can still be a good surgeon and have a life. And if that's how someone else wants to do it, that's great. That's wonderful. But actually, that's not how I want to do it.
And so what happens now when you are showing up more peaceful, more trusting in yourself with not needing that external validation and really being willing to do things different? Have things shifted around you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I am happier for one. I am physically healthier. I was having some pretty severe hypertension
Mhm.
previously. I am more fulfilled in my personal relationships with both my kids and my husband. I am enjoying all these hobbies that I would do once a year previously. And now I'm doing regularly. I used to wonder how people had hobbies and what it actually meant to have a hobby. But now I know, and I have many of them, and sometimes too much to do. But I am enjoying my life, and I think that's what's really important.
And how did this letting go of that belief that you didn't belong, how did that impact your friendships in particular?
Well, there was a time of feeling like I didn't belong anywhere because I didn't actually, we already talked about not feeling like you actually belonged with the guys.
Mhm.
But then not having enough time per se to get fit in with the moms, for example, at school, the other moms,
Mhm.
um, or female friends, not having the time to really develop the female friendships, regularly, whether it be in a book club or in um, regular get-togethers or going out to have lunch or whatever the case may be, and so I never felt like I belonged, and so sometimes I would, for example, be invited to something, but I would just say no, or I just felt awkward or whatever the case is. And I have really kind of let that go and willed myself to let go of that sense of not belonging because I realized that I was blocking myself from some of these relationships with that feeling of not belonging.
Yeah. I have decided, this just reminded me that one of my words for the year is belong. And I've decided that I just belong. And it's amazing when you just decide that you actually do belong, you feel much better. And then lots of opportunities open up in spaces that previously I never thought I did belong. And I'm like, oh, I could belong there too. And
Absolutely.
it's pretty cool. So I would invite anyone listening, you can decide you belong. And that's probably an evolution from letting go of the story that you don't belong, and sitting there for a while and then embracing the fact that you do belong. But pretty cool. And I think you've said also noticing how you are the same as some of the people that you work with now. You had to go through this period of honoring how you're different, but you've also gotten tremendous value of seeing that you are able to be the same and do many of the same things that male neurosurgeons do, that somehow this othering and isolation had kept you from. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Um, can you explain to me
Yeah.
what?
I was thinking about how, this is my story probably, but I was thinking about how all the male surgeons really embrace being surgeons and they love it. And many of them have amazing personal lives and they go helicopter skiing and travel and live in other countries, and that is sort of expected and reasonable. But in the women surgery category, there is a lot of struggling and suffering that is kind of expected, and it doesn't bother you or us because that's just part of the culture, right? And yet I think now you've given yourself permission to enjoy being a surgeon and enjoy living, and that you are actually in many ways similar to many of the people that you work with. You're noticing again how you belong rather than how you're different.
Yeah, I think it's just in this feeling of, oh wait, I can do that too.
That's it. That is what
You know,
you said. Yes. Well, and
absolutely.
it reminds me of why not me, right? Why not me?
Yeah,
And I can do that too. And it's really giving yourself permission to live the life that fits and to do things that are fun and that you like, which I think, for myself included, that was a big journey. And I even still sometimes I'm like, am I really allowed to do something I like? Is that okay? Am I allowed to, sit out in the sunshine on this day? And like, because the culture of medicine is like someone's going to discover, or, if I have fun, then someone else isn't, and that isn't okay.
exactly. But I do think that there is a feeling sometimes from men that when they want to go blow off steam, they're allowed to go blow off steam with their buddies and, like you said, go on a ski trip or whatever the case is. And I think sometimes we women cut ourselves off from that because we feel so totally responsible for work and our kids and keeping things together and not, being too indulgent, I guess, in
Yeah.
some of these things. But you know what? I did have this realization, and I think some of my friends would laugh if they heard this because I am good at having fun
Yeah.
when I
Okay.
try
Yeah.
but it is. Sometimes I would limit myself, from certain things. And at a point, I think it's okay that we women, we're allowed to have fun too. And we're allowed to, be indulgent occasionally. We work really hard and these aren't events reserved for the guys.
And I'm not sure they're indulgent. In many ways, I think they're necessary. They're
Yeah.
really ways of refilling your cup. And it strikes me that people who like neurosurgery and trauma surgery, you guys like the fast, exciting
Adrenaline seeker.
energy. And so, of course, your re-energizing is going to come doing things like that some people might consider indulgent, but it's really when you were saying that, I'm like, well, it makes perfect sense that was what refills their cup. I never thought about it that way, but how cool. So I'm curious, let's talk a little bit about the coaching tools that have helped you get here, because I love hearing people's interpretation and how they worked for them.
So the biggest one that I've used in the past few months is, of course. So, there are always going to be frustrating things that happen in our regular life and our work life. And it's just, of course, that's going to happen. Of course, that person said it that way. Or, of course, this is the outcome. But it doesn't have to bring me down because I expected it. Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
So thank you for that one,
Just
Jessie.
such liberation. And of course, and sometimes people, when they hear it, they're like, wow, well, you're like resigning yourself. I'm like, oh no, it's a gleeful, of course. It's
It
just
is.
a letting go.
A kind of like just laughing it off sort of thing, like, okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna deal with this in a moment.
Yeah. Love
And
it.
then the other one I really love, which I think I is so important, is saying thank you, not
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
That is such a good one because women in general apologize for everything. "Oh, I'm sorry, can you scoot over? Oh, I'm sorry, can I use
Mhm.
the phone for a second?" Rather than saying like, "Well, thank you for waiting for me
Mhm.
while I took
Mhm.
that phone call." And I
I
really
think
love that one.
I am not a surgeon, but it strikes me too as there's often messaging in the OR. And so, you say, "Oh, I'm sorry about needing whatever." And instead of saying, "Thank you for passing me this tool," for example, it changes the whole culture and energy of a room.
Absolutely,
I love that.
absolutely.
And tell me, the other one I wanted to talk about is this idea that it wasn't built for you, because it seems so apropos to being a surgeon, a woman in surgery. Because I have leaned into talking recently that medicine actually wasn't built for women. And so so many of the ways we were trained, they didn't take into account the fact that you might have children, for example, and you might have a family at home. And that's really how I got into physician wellness, is I had a baby in med school. And I was like, well, now what do you do? Because the patients are depending on you, but you also have a baby depending on you. And there's this inherent conflict. And it's not that both can't be done. And in fact, the studies would show that it's helpful to have a full life as a physician. But surgery, I know, was not built for women. How has that thought liberated you?
It has liberated me to, coming from I've got to be just like the guys
Mhm.
to realizing that I actually can't be just like the guys and I'll never be just like the guys. And guess what? That's okay because I'll find my own path.
Mhm.
And luckily, the world has evolved enough to where I do fit in. I have found somewhere that I fit in, and I'm happy there. And so here.
Yeah, I love that. So I think our main message today is that you don't have to do it the way that other people told you, and you can create a life that fits. And I'm going to say stand tall, maybe even like a tree, but just stand tall as who you are. Because when you do that, we keep people like Jenny in neurosurgery. And if I have a neurosurgical emergency, I'm definitely calling you. But we need people who are balanced and are enjoying life and feel good about themselves. And there are lots and lots of ways to do it. So I'm hoping that people who are listening, who maybe feel like they're in a situation that's not aligned, or they feel stuck, or they're feeling shame that whatever they're doing isn't working out, to recognize that maybe where you are isn't built for you, but that there is a place that is built for you, and you can create a life that works for you. You just simply have to build it, honestly. And that takes some creativity and some courage. But when you do, amazing things can happen.
And you can find something that's so different than what you were taught that is just going to work out for you so much better than you thought. And it's worth it. The shame that you're feeling is going to go away.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It makes me think too, that shame is a bit of alchemy, right? When you work through it, you actually grow stronger, and you've built all of these tools through coaching that helped you make that decision around work feel good. But you're also feeling better in so many other things. And you've shifted, right? Your ability to have friendships and all of your relationships, everything feels better. And so it is worth working through the shame. And it is worth finding a place that feels good to you. And in this day and age where there are so many places in medicine where people feel like they're misaligned or stuck, it's the belief and the knowing. Let Jenny be an example that even for someone in neurosurgery, you can come up with a creative solution. And I can hear now that people in primary care will say, well, you can do that because you're in neurosurgery. But you also, the neurosurgeons say the same things. Well, you can't do that because you're in neurosurgery. So there are lots of creative ways to practice that allow you to do the things that you love if you're willing to be brave and jump in and honor your true self.
Thank you, Jessie.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story and for having this conversation with me. I know that listeners will find it helpful. And I love hearing back from listeners who do find especially guest episodes helpful, because I usually reach out and tell the person, hey, someone said your episode is really helpful, because it's meaningful to all of us to be a model and to share our story and to help other people in a world where we often don't share and aren't vulnerable and feel so isolated. So thank you all so much for listening today, and we will be back next week with another exciting episode.
Thank you for joining us. Be sure to stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering to practice.
Please check the show notes for additional resources and insights, and please explore our other episodes.
If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Please share this podcast with colleagues, friends, and family members. And remember, when you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change.
We offer coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, retreats, and talks. Visit healingmedicinepodcast.com to learn more.
Please note the content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. Always participate in our mindful moments safely.
Welcome to today's mindful moment, a moment to reflect on standing tall when you aren't, and noticing how you can redesign things so that they fit you when you let go of this idea that there's something wrong with you. Finding a moment to pause and settle in and take a big, deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And bring a hand to heart if that's available and safe, as this moment may require some self-compassion. If it's okay and safe to do so, close your eyes, pressing that heel of the hand into the heart space and rubbing the top hand on the bottom hand, enjoying the skin to skin. Taking in a huge deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Letting it feel amazing. And taking a moment to reflect on who you are. All the things within you that are actually amazing. And taking a moment to reflect on the ways in which you have not honored those things to try to fit in. Taking a moment to reflect on where shame and fear have led the way. Sending yourself compassion for those moments. Of course, they led the way. And would you like them to continue to lead the way? Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Letting it feel good. Taking a moment to consider what in your life in this moment is out of alignment. Are you doing things simply to appease others, or because you think you are supposed to, or because you don't know what else to do? What if you paused, took a breath, decided that you could stand tall, even if you aren't tall? What would it look like to stand tall? What would it look like to believe in yourself? To decide that you are okay as you are? And that if a system isn't built exactly for you, that you can ask for changes, you can make changes, you can find a spot that still works for you. What might that look like? What's possible? Taking in another deep, full breath of possibility. And an exhale. Breathing in creativity. And an exhale. Remembering that you are enough just as you are.
Yes.
Thanks so much for listening.